G'day guys and gal, the Horus Heresy is the most hectic sub-series of a sci-fi setting ever in existence. Over 100 novels, short stories, audio dramas, countless characters, more awesome moments than I can count. It can seem quite overwhelming and it is very hard to explain the whole thing in one single video. So what if we condense the Heresy to the lens of one man and one man only? What if we look at the Heresy purely from the Emperor's perspective? What did he think was happening during it? What was he aware of? What was he unaware of? It's actually really interesting to remove our omnipresent knowledge as the reader and instead only see the Heresy through one pair of eyes, despite how impressive those eyes may be. By doing this, we can also explain some of the Emperor's seemingly strange decisions that he made during the Heresy. Before we get started, testosterone in men has dropped around 30% on average over the last few decades. Young, fit guys are measuring their testosterone and finding to be on par with a fat 6-year-old, leading to guys either living in constant weariness and fighting an uphill battle, or getting on testosterone, which has a lot of side effects, is a multiple injection per week commitment, and also shuts down your balls and fertility. This is why, through my company, Natty Plus, we have formulated the ultimate testosterone booster, a completely natural supplement, no banned ingredients. The formula is scientifically proven to dramatically increase natural testosterone. Now I know that sounds sus and I get it. There are so many dog shit natural test boosters out there that are formulated like us, do nothing, and use literal scam lying AI ads. So instead of telling you how Tonkat Ali by itself showed a 37% increase in testosterone in a controlled study, or how boron has been shown to increase free testosterone by 29% in studies, or Shilajit increasing by 20% in studies, I'll just show you the raw results we've gotten for our customers. This guy got a 77% increase in total testosterone and he wasn't even hypergonadal. This dude got a clean 30% increase, whereas this guy got a 200% increase, taking him from hypergonadal to within the reference range. But why does our stuff work? Why do only we seem to have the blood work? Well, a lot of other test boosters just overload really hard on Tonkat Ali, or they throw in ingredients that aren't science-backed but sound impressive. But the issue is that low testosterone in men can be caused by so many factors: high SHBG, high cortisol, vitamin D deficiency, zinc deficiency, poor LH signaling. Tonkat Ali lowers SHBG and cortisol, which is awesome, but if you simply have vitamin D deficiencies, whilst your SHBG and cortisol is already low, Tonkat ain't gonna do shit for you. A vitamin D supplement, on the other hand, would work wonders. Our formula works so well because it's designed to tick off every box. I'm so fucking proud of this product and I'd love for you to try it. You can actually also get our Ultimate Ashwagandha Complex 50% off if you pair it with the test booster to get even better results. And if you use my link or code Majorkill below, you get 20% off your entire order. Today I'll go over the Horus Heresy through the lens of the Emperor, showing what he knew, what he didn't know, and how that affected his decision making. Let's get into it. Something we need to note is that the Emperor didn't know everything. He was a powerful psyker, had the gift of advanced foresight, but foresight in 40k isn't super reliable, and it more so shows off a destination instead of the exact path to the destination. So the Emperor may foresee a victory, attempt to reach it, but take a wrong turn and end up in defeat. He could also see much of the galaxy and what was happening, but only if his vision was unimpeded by stuff like warp storms, and he wasn't too busy focusing on other stuff. It's also important to remember that the war on the webway took about 99% of his concentration, so the Emperor was not omnipotent. In a lot of ways, he was kind of like the Eye of Sauron. His gaze could travel far, but he was stuck on his golden throne, and there was a lot he didn't know. But let's actually take it from the start. The Emperor was working on his webway project, saving humanity and whatnot, just a casual Tuesday. Then a massive warp surge slams into his project and breaches the wards. A flaming demonic avatar bursts into the throne room, and the Emperor, with a broken heart, sees his son Magnus. He tells Magnus what he just did, and Magnus leaves in shame. The Emperor still believes he can save the webway project, but he needs help, so he summons Russ and sends him to retrieve Magnus and bring him back to Terra. He also sends Valdor to oversee the retrieval operation and make sure it goes smoothly. Now, a lot of people call this a stupid move. However, Russ is fiercely loyal to the Emperor. Valdor was there to help manage it, and the Emperor just thought Magnus had been a dipshit. Not that he was currently the main cog in the Chaos God's plans. He was also not aware that Horus had fallen to Chaos and would try to intervene. He just believed Chaos had manipulated Magnus to try kick the Emperor in the balls, which wasn't wrong, but it was a lot bigger than that. I mean, Russ actually took numerous steps to try and avoid the battle with Magnus and the Thousand Suns. It was actually mostly Magnus's fault for causing the battle. Now the Emperor would then get bad news after bad news. Horus was a traitor, as was Angron, Mortarion, and Fulgrim. Lehman destroyed Prospero and probably killed Magnus. The Emperor wasn't happy to hear about all this, but in his mind, his forces massively outnumbered the traitors still, and fixing the webway was much more important than some Civil War bullshit. So he kept his focus on the webway project, and he trusted Malcador and Rogel to sort out Horus. The Emperor wasn't aware of how involved Chaos was yet, nor how dangerous the threat of Horus was. Then shit really hit the fan. The Night Lords, Alpha Legion, Word Bearers and Iron Warriors were also traitors. Ferrus was killed, Vulcan presumed dead, Corvus missing and also likely dead, their 3 legions crushed. This is where the Emperor started paying a bit more attention, splitting his focus between the webway and the galaxy. He also received a new vision which made him keep the webway gate open longer than he probably should have. A vision that one of his sons would return to Terra via the webway and would be essential in saving the Imperium, which is why the Emperor seemingly wasted so many custodian lives for an unwinnable war. It was to try keep the webway gate open to allow this future to come true. The Emperor was now keeping a much closer eye on the heresy. When Corvus came to Terra, the Emperor spoke with him directly and gave him instructions on how to use special technology to rapidly rebuild his legion. The Emperor also located Vulcan and watched over him as Conrad tortured him. It was the Emperor who gave Vulcan just enough resolve to escape from Conrad and begin his long, painful journey to Terra to be the Emperor's gate guardian. He also began speaking with Malcador about activating contingencies, such as preparing for the Grey Knight's creation. However, the Emperor still couldn't quite make out what was happening with many of his sons. The Word Bearers and World Eaters had just created the Ruin Storm, a warp storm that cut the galaxy in half. The Emperor couldn't see past the Ruin Storm, so he couldn't see Guilliman, the Lion, Sanguinius or Jagadai. At one point, he actually believed Sanguinius had been killed on Cygnus Prime. The Emperor was a smart cookie though. He was aware that Guilliman was likely empire building and preparing for Imperium 2, Electric Boogaloo. He also became aware that the Lion lived and was heading to Ultramar. This knowledge pleased the Emperor. He knew if Guilliman declared independence from the Imperium and founded his own empire, the Lion would destroy him, and if not, then the Lion would help bring Guilliman to Terra. The Emperor had complete faith in the Lion. The Emperor also wasn't aware if Jagadai was a traitor or not, as at this point he didn't understand Jagadai very well and couldn't see past the Ruin Storm. So the Emperor and Malcador had run predictions on who would fall. Some Primarchs were always going to fall, others were always going to stay loyal. Then there were the uncertain ones. For example, it came as a big surprise that Mortarion fell to the enemy, considering he had a massive hate boner for the warp, and the traitors used the warp like US politicians used Epstein's Island. For the most part, although helping where he could, the Emperor continued to allow Malcador and Rogel to handle things. The war in the webway had reached its peak, and his forces were finally being driven back out of the webway. The Emperor, through the sacrifice of 1,000 Psykers, was able to leave the Golden Throne for a short period of time and enter the webway. He strode forth like an avatar of vengeance and obliterated the demonic legions, driving them back. He also faced and subdued Draknian, turning him into a sword and banishing him deep into the webway via Ra and Endymion. This last push by the Emperor was to save his remaining warriors and to also try and give Vulcan one last chance to reach Terra. When he pulled his warriors out and they prepared to close the webway gate, the Emperor hesitated, willing Vulcan to appear, but when his son did not, the gate was sealed. When asked what they should do now by one of his custodians, the Emperor replied, "I do not know." And he wasn't joking. See, not only was the webway project now doomed, thus humanity was fucked no matter the result of the heresy, but Vulcan also hadn't made it to Terra, so the Emperor thought they were now doomed to lose the war as well. Now Vulcan did actually end up making it due to help from Eldrad, however as I said, the Emperor's foresight shows the destination, not the journey. He foresaw Vulcan arriving and tried to make sure it would happen, but it happened through a different route than expected. Although the webway gate was now shut on the Emperor's side, it was now like a wound in reality that the demons were trying to rip open, so the Emperor now had to expend a ton of energy keeping the webway gate shut, otherwise demons would flood Terra from the inside. At a similar time, the power of all 4 Chaos Gods were attempting to just bumfuck Terra, so the Emperor also had to engage in a massive warp duel with the gods to keep Terra untainted, meaning the traitors would be forced to contend with Rogel and Malcador's physical armies. While the Emperor fought the war in the warp, his armies would fight the war in real space. Now the Emperor had been watching Horus a fair bit when he could, the two even having psychic conversations where Horus mocked the Emperor and the Emperor just looked at him sadly. Horus knew that he needed to hide his true power from the Emperor in order to try bait the Emperor into being reckless, so Horus gave himself dementia and would also put himself into extended comas. This was to ensure the Emperor couldn't properly read his plan or power. This is also why Horus was super fucking useless leading up to the Siege of Terra and during it. He had fried his own brain so the Emperor would underestimate him, and then Horus just trusted his armies to do most of the work. During the siege, the Emperor was under an insane amount of strain fighting a psychic battle with chaos. However, he did want to try hatch one last plot. He allowed Magnus the Red to infiltrate the Imperial Palace and reach him. He believed that if he could turn Magnus back to the Loyalist side, he could use him to help take the massive psychic load of the throne off himself, and then he'd be a lot more free to help out his armies. It was a big risk, but the Emperor saw it as worth it, as if it worked, he could go from desperately holding everything together to being able to push back against the enemy. Anyway, it went fucking terribly. Malcador got killed and Vulcan was forced to beat Magnus into a bloody pulp, which then caused Magnus to become a demon to save his own life. Malcador was resurrected due to the sacrifice of another perpetual after the Emperor begged her to sacrifice herself for Malcador. The Emperor would stay on the throne almost the entire siege. He was projecting this Aegis that was blocking demons from entering the palace, so most of the Siege of Terra was just mortals versus mortals, a style of fighting that favored the defenders. However, his Aegis was slowly shrinking as he was weakened. To make matters worse, Demon Magnus began a spell in the webway which was draining the Emperor of power, so the Emperor commanded Vulcan to go kill Magnus. The fight was brutal. Magnus was constantly killing Vulcan, only for Vulcan to revive and keep attacking, wearing Magnus down. The Emperor was watching the fight closely. At one point, Magnus even saw the Emperor's face and was terrified. Eventually, Vulcan crushed his brother's skull and ended the fight, before walking back to the throne room horrifically injured. Then Horus activated his trap card. He lowered the shields on the vengeful spirit in order to try bait the Emperor and the loyalist Primarchs to attack him. See, Horus had finally cast off his dementia and was now at his full power, but the Emperor didn't know this since Terra was half submerged in the warp. He thought Horus was powerful, but beatable, especially if he had his elite warriors by his side. We also need to remember that the Emperor had no idea Guilliman, Russ, and the Line were very close to the Sol system, as the entire system was surrounded by a mega warp storm. So for the Emperor, this was do or die. Malcador took the Emperor's place on the throne, an act that made the Emperor incredibly upset. So the Emperor had tried to make multiple contingencies to prevent Malcador from ever having to sit on the throne. All of those had failed, so now his own failures were consigning his closest friend to an agonizing death. The Emperor teleported to the vengeful spirit with his warriors, including Dawn, Valdor, and Sanguinius, and immediately realized he had been so wrong about Horus, as Horus immediately sprung a trap on the Emperor's forces and almost overwhelmed them, causing the Emperor's own custodians to be puppeted and attack him. Even the Emperor was struggling with this, and now he knew he could not beat Horus, so he started absorbing an extreme amount of power from the warp and began his ascension to become the Dark King, as only in that form could he reliably beat Horus. Now from the reader's perspective, this seemed like a pretty retarded idea. We saw all the demons getting horny for the Dark King. We saw the evidence to suggest the Emperor doing this would achieve a total chaos victory. However, the Emperor did not see this. He just thought he could power up, clap Horus's bold ass, then power down. It was actually quite funny when he was on his way to beat Horus and bumped into Orlanus' person. See, the Dark King Emperor was on a literal unstoppable rampage and came to a screeching halt. The Emperor was shocked. Out of all times and places, his oldest companion was here, a man he hadn't seen in thousands of years. It actually shook the Emperor. He told Orlanus that he didn't stop the rampage out of sentimentality, but because he was literally so flabbergasted by this turn of events. Orlanus was able to convince the Emperor to let go of the Dark King power before it was too late, by telling the Emperor to use his now godlike perspective. The Emperor did so, saw that Orlanus was right, and abandoned the power. He would just have to try wing it and clutch a victory over Horus. He even discarded any form of empathy and most of his humanity before the fight, so he'd be super locked in. Now he didn't discard this humanity because he was worried he wouldn't be able to bring himself to slay Horus. It was more so to ensure that none of Chaos's tricks or horrors would cause him to hesitate. For example, seeing Sanguinius' defiled corpse would have fucked with the old Emperor, but not in this new state of mind. The Emperor completely winged his fight with Horus, literally just doing his best. He fought like a cheeky bastard, going for metaphorical dick shots the entire time. Whenever he got an unexpected power boost, such as when the Astronomicon was turned back on, he just accepted it and kept fighting. Eventually, the Emperor managed to bullshit his way into a victory and was carried to the Golden Throne by Rogel. The last thing the Emperor does before he sits on the Golden Throne is look at Rogel with pure horror and fear, knowing he was about to consign himself to an eternity of agony. Basically, everything after the webway gate closing, the Emperor just started sort of winging it. In some respects, this made him better. He was able to react to things in real time and not on some kind of preordained schedule. On the other hand, he did make some dumb fucking decisions, such as letting Magnus infiltrate the palace and kill Malcador and then nearly himself. But that covers the Horus Heresy from the Emperor of Mankind's perspective. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up the Ultimate Testosterone Booster. Link or code Majorkill for 20% off. Join the Discord for more memes. Let us see you in the next one. Peace.